So I'm going to talk to you about Dave and Belinda. Dave and Belinda's funds is agency managed. Their parents are self-directed with their parents. So Dave and Belinda are brother and sister. They're in Dave's 34, Belinda's 32. And they have been living away from home for 7 years. They left home on Boxing Day for a home of their own, I think. And initially, the family, Ron and Lynn, their parents, were providing most of the support to Dave and Belinda. They both have an intellectual disability. So initially, Ron and Lynn were providing the support, and they were actually really aware that the way they were doing it wasn't sustainable and that something had to happen. And they got some state government funding that was quite flexible. It's probably a little bit like your ISP funding. And that actually started to mean that Dave and Belinda were getting the more support they needed to have their living arrangement more sustainable. The NDIS came in. I think Dave and Belinda were the first people to go on the NDIS in Newcastle. They sort of, I think the launch was in July, 1st of July, and they sort of snuck in the door beforehand. I think they were looking for families who already knew what they wanted, and Dave and Belinda had sat down independently of each other and worked out their goals and aspirations, and had really had a good idea of what they were wanting in life, and that's perhaps why they were one of the first families to go through the door. Even though they are agency managed, their parents have chosen agency managed because it needs to be sustainable. So with Dave and Belinda in their 30s, their parents are probably late 50s, 60s. And, I've known Ron for a few years now, Dave and Belinda's dad and Lynn, and they're taking holidays now. I think they went away for 3 weeks last year. So, there's supports around for Dave and Belinda when they need it. They believe it's vital to choose their own support workers, and they look for people with the right values. This is what Ron says. They want innovative people with new ideas, and they don't want anybody who comes with a traditional model of disability or a traditional service model of disability, a traditional model of service to people with disabilities. Dave and Belinda have to feel comfortable with who's coming into their home, and and the person who supports them has to have a desire to help them achieve their goals and aspirations. They don't have to have qualifications in disability. In fact, they sometimes think that that's a hindrance to their role. Dave and Belinda are totally involved in selecting their staff, and they have, what they've done is they've got an agreement with the service provider that they can select their staff. They do all the recruitment themselves. So they started out just by putting an ad in the paper and then meeting people, and people would apply, and they'd meet them at the local club and then sort of decide who would come back for another interview and who they'd get to know a bit more, and they were employed by a service provider. Over time, they've evolved the way they do things. They've still got some support where people are employed by the service provider, and they've got a proviso. This is the other important thing. If you go to the trouble of recruiting your own staff and they're employed by a service provider, please put in your service agreement with the service provider, the agreement you make with the service provider, that person is to work with you. There's nothing more annoying than going to the trouble of recruiting a support worker only to find they're given work in the day program and they're no longer available to you. So stipulate that in an agreement. If you might say that they can work with other people, but you have preference or whatever, but you really want to make sure that you don't become the recruiter of good support only to find them lost.
So what checks do they put away for their employees?
What checks do they? As far as recruiting people for them?
Yeah, if they're doing it themselves, I was just wondering.
Well, they're actually employed by some of them are employed by a service provider. So the service provider has their own checks. So usually what might happen if I decided to, or if they recruited somebody, they'd find the right person, and then they'd still have to have a police, if they're employed by the service provider would say they still have to have the police check. They might still have to have a working with children check. The first aid certificate is often the things that are required. They're not working. Some services say that people have got to have I don't know if it's the same here, but it's called a Cert 3 in Disability Studies in New South Wales. Do you have that sort of thing here? It's a qualification that people get at TAFE. Cert 4, yeah. A lot of services are saying that's what they need. You've got to find a service who's prepared to drop that rule. And that might be part of the issue when you're finding a service provider. Do they need a Cert 3 in Disability Studies? In my book, it's not an advantage, and in Dave and Belinda's book and their parents' book, it's not an advantage. They have, however, gone a little bit further. They've also Belinda's a keen swimmer. She teaches swimming lessons to young children, and she's a volunteer at the Surf Life Saving Club. And they were after a lifestyle assistant for her, and I think a homemaker assistant, for Dave and Belinda, who would just help with them around the house, help with some of those household duties that both Dave and Belinda found it a bit difficult, or might need a bit of assistance with, or might need a bit of prompting with. And Belinda was working with somebody Belinda was volunteering with somebody at the surf club who had some qualifications and skills around, she had her own business, and if I read the notes I might be able to find out what it was. She has her own business and had her own ABN, and they decided they'd like to engage her as a contractor. Now, she's not an employee, she's engaged as a contractor in the same way that I might get an electrician to come and put a light in my house, and I engage him as a contractor. They got this lady, she wasn't registered, so she went through the registration process with the NDIS and became a registered provider. Now, it took time. The NDIS, I think she was the first independent contractor providing direct support to go through the registration process, and the NDIS didn't really know what to do with her, and she didn't have a Cert 4 in Disability Studies. And Ron's a very, very, very nice, mild-mannered man, but I've seen smoke come out of his ears sometimes we're going through that process of getting the person registered with the NDIS, assisting her to be registered with the NDIS. Anyhow, but it happened, and now she's registered and she provides support to Dave and Belinda. There's another person who's on their staff team who's wanting to get an ABN and do the same. So, of course, once they're registered, they can go in and claim from the NDIS their payment for the support that they provide. So this is the way that Dave and Belinda have, and their family self-direct their support, even though it's agency managed. So some of the people who are plan managing have decided to can engage contractors. There is that grey area there, and we tell people to get advice around that. So we refer people to Ashurst Law Firm for advice around contracting, or to find, advice from the other sources that they have available to them, and also provide those links that are available from the tax office and from work cover around the difference between contractors and employees. But some people have decided to directly employ their own staff, and we're able to assist them to do that as well.